Hey, everybody. Hey, thank you very much. Again, my name is Dean Brewer. I'm a senior advisor to Libryo. I'm located in the United States in Southern California. I've been in this industry for 20 plus years. I started a regulatory content company back in the late 1990s. So I feel like I know what the history of where we are today, how we got here. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And here's my the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the background, the challenge that it is to gather regulations so that you can do your job, which to me, it's regulatory compliance. It's making everybody happy that you're following the laws and regulations for your particular facility or company. And we'll talk about how compliance used to work, what we used to do, and the other last part would be a better way of knowing, the Libryo way, what we do at Libryo and why Libryo is solving the problems that have been around for a long time, but Libryo seems to have the answers. I should say does have the answers. So we talk about a bit of the background. And we at Libryo are building a world where all regulations are digitized and available via a single platform, ensuring everyone knows what to do for a just and sustainable world. So what we're saying is that Libryo has evolved into a leader in technology, using technology to applying it to laws and regulations. Libryo's goal, which is a great goal, is to have every law and regulation in the world on its platform. It's an exciting thing. It's a great goal, and it's what attracted me to Libryo, that if I can come to one source and have everything I need to do my job, that's a great thing. People have tried this before, but Libryo is actually pulling it off, and they're using it through a combination of hardworking employees and technology. So where we are today with the regulatory database of Libryo is we've got 81 countries of data. We've got almost 16,000 users, 15,000 laws, 60,000 plus summaries of the laws, and we're presenting 31,000 Libryo streams every day that you can follow. We're keeping you current. We're telling you when a law has changed that you may have to do something. It may impact you, and it's kind of exciting. So, like I said, today Libryo's in 40 plus countries, monitoring 450 plus levels of government. An example here is in the United States. We have the federal government laws. We have all of the states. 50 states. We have we're getting county and city laws. We're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of jurisdictions that we're having to monitor. For example, just the CFR in the environmental space, if you were trying to do this without automation, is over 17,000 detailed requirements. That's crazy. And that's just the CFR for the US. Imagine applying that to all the states, talking hundreds of thousands of laws and regulations that you have to be, that you're responsible for. So these are some of the companies that Libryo's been successful and doing business with. Chick-fil-A, Fluor. So we're kind of in a lot of different industries, and a lot of high quality companies have trusted Libryo to be their regulatory provider. So as everybody knows, talk to the environmental managers, regulations are overwhelming. It's crazy. There's so many things I have to do. Whether I know about the regulation or not, I'm still responsible. So if something happens and I'm not managing that regulation, but it's telling me I have to comply and I didn't do it, I'm in trouble. And so you've got to have a way of being able to know all the regulatory requirements, and you have to have a way of knowing how to follow the change of them so that you can take the appropriate actions. Again, this is what Libryo does. So law is poorly organized. Again, it's got, every country has their set of laws. However, I'm sitting in Houston, Texas, and I think I've got everything handled. I've got, my US federal law, I've got my Texas law, I got my Houston city law. I'm styling it. I've got everything the way it needs to be. But I just opened a facility. I'll just use Germany, for instance. I opened a facility in Germany. I am responsible for regulatory compliance in Germany. What do? I need to have those laws and regulations. In the past, it's been impossible. You actually had to hire a lawyer maybe in country. But now, thanks to Libryo, we have the ability to monitor the laws and regulations in Germany from Houston in the same format that we're monitoring the federal and state laws. So it's kind of exciting if you think about it. Libryo has moved in the direction of organizing all the laws and regulations all into the same format. So it looks good. So again, I'm reiterating today, you use Google to find out a law, you have lawyers, you got spreadsheets. That's regulatory data 1.0. That's the old way. But Libro's through artificial intelligence, different APIs, but using outside, how would you say, we have a staff of collaborators that help us manage the data. You're able to get regulatory data 2.0. So the data, again, back to the Houston example, I'm able to take my Houston data and my Germany data and fulfill my corporate obligations, which are to monitor regulatory, the same sort of regulatory compliance sitting in Houston. So back in the day, like I said earlier, I've been in this space since the 1990s, and there was no internet, and companies would subscribe to paper publications from states, federal government. They would have people read them. They're out of date the minute you got it. Very interesting way of doing business, but that's just the way it was. There was no other way. So what we would do is we would take these paper, in another company, we would take these paper products, we would scan them, and we would build a hard drive of all these regulations, and then we'd send it to the customers. They'd send the hard drive back. I mean, we're talking, it was like we were just trying to automate and put in one place all the regulations. So if you were, again, this Houston guy, forget about international. We had no way to get international regulations. But if you were this Houston guy, we'd send you the laws for Texas and the federal government. We'd monitor them. You'd send back the hard drive. We'd give you back another hard drive. It was crazy. So eventually this evolved into sending a CD or DVD. The same thing. It was a lot cheaper. The post office loved us. We were spending a ton of money. And then in 1996, the internet started for our type of business, where we started publishing what we would put on the hard drive or the DVD. We started putting on the internet. That was interesting. It was very difficult to do, but we did it. And we used to say, like, we invented regulatory compliance on the internet, but that's probably not true. There were 3 or 4 companies doing all this at the same time. And a lot of it had to do with the federal government was also starting to publish online. And so we were just mirroring what they were doing. And, everybody was, we were making strides. However, international regulations were non-existent. I remember one time somebody said they had international regs. I actually flew to Salt Lake City. And then to see this box of regulations where a lawyer in, I want to say, I'm not sure what country, maybe it was China. A lawyer had gathered all these regulations and sent them to this guy in Salt Lake City. But that's how we were trying to build international regulations. Again, it was impossible to get. So the federal government started, where things broke through when the federal government got really good at publishing the Federal Register and the CFR online. They would start to, they were doing it daily. They would still do their hard copy of the book, but we would buy a feed. They were charging, I want to say it was $16,000 a year, which was a lot of money back then. We would get a daily feed of the Federal Register, and we would build our own website. And guess what? We are now publishing the Federal Register online on a daily basis. Again, it was impossible to get state publications or online because they didn't really have it yet. So what we would do is, again, subscribe to the books, and then we would scan them and put them on that way. In fact, I remember I had a son who was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. He would pick up the weekly book from the D.C. and send it to us, and we would scan it. So we had more scanners. We had people scanning like crazy, but we were actually starting to build a pretty good online database of regulations. They were not current, but that was the best we would do. And we let our customers know. And again, we hadn't really built any sort of compliance tools. All we were doing is republishing the regulations so that everybody, so they were all in one place. And then eventually it started to where, I want to say by 2005 or so, states started following the federal government and started publishing their regulations online. But again, they weren't accurate. I remember a lot, but I remember people didn't believe the regulations that we were putting online because they were used to using these books. And I have a good example of that. I remember we were doing some work with International Code Council, and the code inspectors had to have the book in their back pocket. And so when we offered an online service of these books, they wanted nothing to do with it. It took a long time to get people to even look at regulations online compared to where we are today, where that's just how it is. So the evolution has been such that, another good example is when the stuff first started being publishing, there'd be spelling errors. Believe it or not, the state would make all sorts of errors in spelling. Well, we started changing them, and we would start getting yelled at by people saying, you can't change this, you can't. And I'm thinking, well, they're misspellings. So we went back to whatever, so to have credibility, we went back and republished everything with the spellings in the documents, because guess what? We were trying to mirror exactly what the state has put out, because the quality of the content is everything. And so just little things like that, but we evolved to where we eventually had a product that was accurate, is sometimes more accurate than their state documents, because we were getting feeds from the states in the back end before they published their own regulations. So that's kind of how the industry has evolved to where we are today. But today, where people were just happy to have regulations to look at, today they want the regulations to tell them what to do. So it's amazing how things have evolved. So how did corporations used to deal with a lot of this stuff? So they would try to automate it. They build a little computer program and access database. I mean, again, we're trying to do regulatory compliance. We're trying to meet all the laws and regulations, and there was no real good software out there. A lot of people had come out with stuff, and I call it, people had this software, and I call it filing cabinets, but they didn't have any quality content. So as a result, they've automated their regulatory compliance, but it's crummy because like I said, content is everything. You've got to have good quality content to have good regulatory compliance. So back in the day, it was junk. So then if they don't have a good computer system or a good automated structure, they get poor infrastructure. They can have the greatest content ever, but then the ability to maintain or keep up with all of it, because their infrastructure does not allow for all the regulatory changes, they get what I would say a poor regulatory database. So what does Libryo do? Libryo automates compliance. So Libryo has taken all of the laws and regulations, how would you say, the world's regulatory mess, and we'll call it authorities, and put it all into the Libryo Gigafactory. So, it's fun. There's so much data today that you must use technology in order to achieve regulatory compliance. It's impossible to go back the way it was doing all this manually. You've got to have something. And the thing about what Libryo's been able to do is combine, and the other thing too about all these databases or all this regulatory compliance, it's all these different formats. It's just mind-boggling when you think about it. But in the Libryo Gigafactory, it solved that problem. It's taking all this junk, that's not a good term, but it's taking all this stuff, putting into the Libryo Gigafactory, and guess what? It all comes out in the same format, so that the person sitting in Houston and the person sitting in Germany, it all looks the same, to give sustainable governance, or to give about a good regulatory compliance checklist, or however you want to use it. Everybody uses the data out of Libryo a little differently, depending on what the mission of your facility or your company is. But Libryo, again, takes everything that's a mess and automates it all, and you can use it within the Libryo apps. It's when you just think about how much data, it's a great thing. And Libryo has solved this problem. So what we're saying here is you need to do regulatory compliance. It's all about starting right. Starting right means you have to know what the laws and obligations for your particular facility or company are. So that's what Libryo needs to do. And if you know what if you don't know what your problem is, or if you don't know your laws and regulations, you'll never be able to achieve good regulatory compliance. Libryo allows you to start right, and if you start right, guess what? You end right, and that's what Libryo is doing. Libryo is automating all the world's laws and regulations, and allowing you to have a incredible regulatory compliance. In other words, satisfying your obligations the best way, and it's also cost effective. So I want to thank everybody for listening to me. If you have any questions or anything, please reach out to me. Again, it was very nice doing this presentation, and you guys have a great day. Thank you. Bye.